We ready to go?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting of our instruction work group to order. I'd like to start tonight's meeting by acknowledging that today is September 11th, and it marks the 22nd anniversary of the death of over 3,000 people in one of our nation's greatest tragedies. Like many of you, I remember exactly where I was when we watched the World Trade Centers fall. I was actually in Brooksy Belkey's choir class for my freshman choir class. And we pulled in a TV and our entire school and world kind of stopped around us. And I think I would be remiss not to acknowledge what an impact that had on me as a young person and what an impact that has had on our world. So we're starting with a little bit of a somber note, but moving in to a pretty incredible conversation. This is our first instruction work group of this school year. So welcome back, MMSD. And thank you to all the educators and young people and families who made last week possible. We will start with public comment and then we'll focus on three major areas this evening. We only have one person signed up for public comment, and Jesse, if you want to bring that person on, we're ready to hear from them.
Ellen Boyle, when you're ready, guys, make sure you turn
This is bringing back like
go on your Zoom and you should be good.
turn on like that. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Boyle, and I am a teacher and a parent here in MMSD. I'm starting my 20th year at Franklin Elementary School. And I'm here today to give a teacher perspective of the transportation issues that we've encountered. I could give you my parent perspective as well, but I'm sure you've heard that, hopefully you've heard that loud and clear in the community. Anyway, as a young child, like an educator of young children, is very, very important to me and to my students' families that they get on the bus correctly. I have nightmares where I'm putting students on the wrong bus. I forget to tell them which stop. It's like a general thing that brings teachers a lot of stress at the beginning of the year. So the start of the year, we get our teeny tiny roster in which way down here it lists the kids' bus color. So we take this, we do our Ready, Set, Goal conferences, we send out questionnaires in which parents tell us, oh, this day they're actually going to go to zoo school, and here, and we make all these notes to compile what we consider very beautiful bus list that has all of our colors, exactly where kids are going, highlighted, which kids do different things on different days, because Billy takes the bus on Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, but then goes to UADC on Wednesdays, and Henry is home on Tuesday, Thursday, but goes to Creando on Fridays. It's a lot of work. I spend hours and hours and hours making this document. So Monday, before school starts, it's our Franklin fly-in. We had all of our kindergarten families and new students to school. First students was there at our school with a bus. They were handing out squishy buses, hand sanitizers, pens. We all commented like, this is fantastic. Like, look at the service. We are going to have a great year. That was Monday. On Thursday, which is the day before our first day of students, kindergarten, we were informed it's also our voluntary day as educators. So we did not have to be in our classrooms. We did not have to be checking our email. We were informed at noon that our list of 4 buses was being shrunk into 3, which turned into 4 different colors. We went from 4 colors to 3 new colors, and it was a total nightmare. I spent my entire voluntary day, which I was hoping to catch up, getting my room prepared, making my second list, in which I had to double check everyone's address to make sure they lined up with the web page. It just was a complete disaster. And I spent additional hours and hours preparing my second list. Okay. Parents trust the school district, and more importantly, trust the teachers to make sure their kids are safe. And I look each kid in the eyes and tell them, My job is to teach you, and it's also to keep you safe. And what happened was it was totally unacceptable. In my opinion, there's no way that you were unaware of this situation before the Thursday before the last day of school, or first day of school rather. It just put us into a tailspin that when we were excited to start a normal year, felt completely overwhelming, and we're still like trying to pick up the pieces and regain the family support that we lost those first days. My time is up. I just really want you to take into consideration what amount of stress is put upon your teachers and the people who are responsible for making sure those kids make it home safely. And I think you need to address that or recognize what we went through and what we're still going through to make sure kids are safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I move to approve the minutes from the instruction work group meeting dated August 7th, 2023.
Second.
Second, Board President Nichols. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right. Laura, I'm sorry, I see your hand. Okay, motion carries 7-0. Thank you. We are now going to move into a conversation around the district's school improvement plan, and in working to the district's school improvement plans and in working to have this conversation prepared for the board this evening, we really want board members to be oriented to what we're doing around school improvement, but also to voice what kind of information you need to see progress in these areas. And so this is not the last time we'll get to discuss this. This is a more introductory and informative conversation. This will come back to the board in order for us to be able to see the progress that we make. So I will turn it over to you, Cindy Green.
Thank you so much, Board Member Muldrow. Good evening, everybody. Jesse, would you mind sharing the slide deck? Sure. Thank you so much. As Jesse's pulling it up, I just want to introduce the team that will be sharing some of the great work tonight. So we have Miss Carletra Stanford, who is our Assistant Superintendent for School Leadership. We have Dr. Anu Ebby, who is newly Elementary Associate Superintendent of Schools. And we have Dr. Kristen Getchow, who is our Director of our Mental Health Supports. Online, we also have Tanya, who is one of our school psychs, and she works over at Blackhawk. I'm super excited for her to join us as well. And then in the room tonight, we have additional team members that are experts in certain content areas in the event that we want to dive into any of the questions that the board member has. And we have our other associate superintendents of schools as well that are available. So with that, Jesse, thank you so much. Perfect. So as always, we like to ground in our 3 strategic framework goals. And I think tonight you will see how we're really trying to make sure that we actually realize our goals that we have set with the district. Next slide, please. Also our core values and how we are thinking about our core values and all the work that we do. Next slide. So tonight is really an informational update for the Board of Education, and we're going to be providing an update kind of in 2 areas, really thinking about the launching of this school year and what that looks like for both the district improvement planning as well as our school improvement planning. And then also with that, the conditions that we're thinking about in order to ensure our staff and our students are well and supported through mental health services. Next slide. So launching the school year. So it is the beginning of the school year, as Board Member Muldrow said. And so we really wanted to start with just some beautiful pictures of our babies and our young people on the first days of school. So Jesse, would you mind sharing the video? Thank you so much, Jesse. I don't think it gets better than that, seeing all of the faces of our little ones and of our young people, backpacks as big as the students as they're walking in. So it really has been a really exciting launch to the school year. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carletra, and she's going to talk a little bit about the welcome back and the beginning of this school year. I wanted to just ensure that the board understands in the community tonight, we're talking about both the responsibility of our district improvement plan as well as individual school improvement. Next slide, please, Jesse.
Thank you, Cindy. So as Cindy said, I am going to just talk briefly about Welcome Back Week and give some highlights around community building, cross-school collaboration, our equity work, and then also the individual planning that schools did during this time. So although Welcome Back Week officially began on August 24th, we did have the opportunity to welcome almost 250 new staff members to the MMSD family earlier that week. When we think about the cross-school collaboration as well as the community building, we also want to highlight that high schools had the opportunity to come together in community at Alliant Energy Center. So all of our high schools were together during that time on the 24th. And they also welcomed Southside staff to that space on that day. As we know, Southside was still under a little bit of construction. And so they joined that team there. And I would be remiss if I did not also give a shout out and just a huge thank you to our community partners for welcoming staff to their spaces and hosting schools for their professional learning. Also thanking staff for their flexibility and the school leaders who work to find spaces that could create comfortable environments for learning. Because I don't know if you all remember, but those were some of the warmest days that we experienced in the summer. And so there was a lot of adjustments that took place for schools to be in places in which they could really take in the learning that was happening during that time. With our equity work, we are continuing our journey with ICS Equity, so our integrated comprehensive systems for equity. And our school teams completed their second day of professional learning with our facilitators from ICS Equity. We also had role-alike time that allowed teams of teachers in various roles to come together and to learn from our literacy vendors that came in and did the learning, as well as from our content area leaders in the district. And so just overall, there was great energy and synergy in all of those professional learning spaces as we prepared for the first day of school. Next slide. So Dr. Ebby is going to really get into our SIP work, but as we lay the foundation for our school improvement plans and how we view continuous improvement as a district, we know that it's essential that we are ensuring that our staff are set up for success by providing the time and the space for learning to take place, providing the tools, providing the resources, and also the expectations, and really truly outlining our ways of working for the year. And so she, again, is going to go deeper into that, but I will lift that central office is really working on coherence, because we know that central office coherence is going to facilitate our school coherence. There's a real intentionality around relationships and trust and partnerships with schools. We're not doing things to schools, we're doing things with schools. And knowing that schools are at the center of our work. And so our work this year in central office is around how are we supporting the work that needs to be done for us to see the progress that we know that we need to make as a district. And one of the things that we're really excited about bringing back this year are our integrated school support system. That's a proactive system that supports our SIP implementation and responds to the data and the needs requests of the schools that they'll be able to put directly into a system that'll get to us so that we can provide that support. So again, Dr. Ebby is going to go into more detail around our school improvement planning and those supports and the resources that we currently have in place. Dr. Ebby.
Yes. Next slide, please. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As Ms. Carla just shared, when we come together in partnerships with between central office and our schools to identify and implement a set of actions that we will take together, we will likely raise student performance across our district. And one approach we take to accomplish this is through our school improvement plan, or a SIP. And school improvement is really about continuous improvement, and it's grounded in the belief that all students can achieve at high level. And as a former principal, I can say my teams experienced this firsthand when we work together in partnership with central office. So as you heard from Ms. Stanford, the central office is also working on becoming more aligned and coherent so that we're all here in service of schools, because that's where our children are, and that's where the adults who are directly working with our children are. Our work with schools is centered on relationships and trust. So for example, when associate superintendents of schools are, we are in schools about 3 times a week, 3 days a week, and we support our principals as thought partners, as coaches, and we truly uplift their instructional leadership. We also do this with our staff because they bring so much expertise, and we do this in the school-based leadership team and in the action team as well. We, as you can see in that in the graphic here, there are 4 focus areas, 3 of which elementary and middle schools will focus on 3: biliteracy, math, and engagement. And there's a 4th area, high school completion, which high schools will focus on.
Recording in progress.
And along with that comes progress monitoring, which means that school teams will come together and see how their data looks, how they're making progress on a monthly basis. And then we also will have quarterly monitoring of progress together with the schools and central office. And as Ms. Stanford shared earlier, we are excited about our integrated school support system, where principals and their teams can think about, oh, we got this in our school improvement planning process, but we need more help with this piece of the process, and they can reach out to central office for support. So that's kind of how the continuous improvement process works between schools and central office. And then we also this year, due to principals really asking for more user-friendly system for the school improvement plan, more user-friendly than the past Google Sheets we were using, we have obtained the Plan for Learning technical, a more technical system for that was designed by educators, which is a really great thing. And it also simplifies the school improvement planning process by streamlining some of the key steps. It's a live document that principals and teams can work together on, and schools can use Plan for Learning to align with their common vision, identify some of their key needs, and work on strategies that will truly impact results. So those are some of the introductory pieces around our school improvement plan, and I will pass it on to Ms. Cindy Green.
Thank you. So Carlotta and Anu both outlined kind of what our SIP is focused on this year in the areas of literacy, biliteracy, math, attendance as the metric, engagement as our strategy for that, and high school completion. And I wanted to just focus on how we got to this. We started with a pretty wide set of metrics back in May or June that we thought we were going to be able to have all of our schools focus on. It had about 12 or 13 metrics. And we know that's too many things. While everything is important, not everything is a priority. So through the review of our end of year data and the strategic framework report that just was recently released, we decided that we wanted to take a more narrow focus in what we were going to have our schools prioritize for the upcoming year. This also is a result of trying to ensure that we have more coherence, not just across departments, but across our system for K-12 and what schools we're focused on. And the result of why those areas is on the screen here. Our data from 22-23 told us that we need to continue to stay the course in the area of literacy and biliteracy. We have much more work to do in that area. Simultaneously, the data told us that we need to ensure that while our schools are always focused on math, and math is always something that is important, we needed to take a deeper dive into that and make that a priority this upcoming year. Think about the strategies that we were asking schools to implement. Think about the prioritization that our central office teams would do in professional learning for that. And while we have made some really great gains and increases in our 4-year completion rates, we know we still have work to do. And so we wanted to ensure that that was a focus for all of our high schools as well. And we know that that work actually starts the moment kids walk through the door at 4K, and it isn't something that our high schools are just responsible for. So that data shows us why the areas that are prioritized this year are the ones that we're attending to. Next slide, please. And so this next slide really gets to this idea of district improvement goals. So one thing that's important for the board and the community to know while we're asking schools to create a school improvement plan, we also are creating a district improvement plan here for us at Central Office. We want to ensure that we are staying true to the idea of coherence, and we also want to ensure that we're modeling the expectations that we're asking of schools. And so with that, this year, we set district improvement goals versus having each school focus just on their individualized school goals. What you will see on the screen here are the goals that we set for us as an entire system. So a 3 percentage point increase in the areas of biliteracy, math, and then in the area of attendance, we want to ensure that we're continuing to focus on attendance as a priority and increase the percentage rate of students attending every day. We know that you must be in school in order to learn. So that engagement piece and that attendance piece is critical. And then a 2 percentage point for our students that will be earning a diploma upon graduation. Next slide, please. So we're gonna continue our conversation, and our conversation now is really gonna focus on the conditions necessary in order for our students to be able to learn and in order for our adults to show up as their best selves in order to teach our students. I think this is going to show the area of coherence that we're constantly addressing tonight across all of our departments. We know it's critically important for us to be aligned, and we also know integration of our work is essential. Students don't show up to be academic students half of the day and social emotional students the other half of the day. We really are trying to think about the whole child, and we're really trying to think about what it means in order for those to have supports. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kristen Getchow, and she's going to go into a little more detail.
Great, thank you, everybody. And I just really want to start by thanking everyone here for the opportunity to get to showcase some of the recent work in the arena of mental health and well-being. The board's support of our students' mental health and well-being has been noted and appreciated. I certainly listen in on all these meetings and know that it's a theme that comes up often. And I'm glad to be here tonight and be here with you. This work is key to our school goals, as we all know that well-being and engagement are key factors to unlocking the learning for our students, similar to what Cindy lifted up a moment before. I'm also going to introduce Tanya Novotnik, who's joining us on video and who's a school psychologist at Blackhawk, and she'll share a school perspective on this project in just a few moments. So next slide. We're here today to share a short progress update, specifically in response to the Safety and Student Wellness Ad Hoc Committee recommendation made last year. In our work during and post-COVID, it became increasingly clear that the awareness of and access to our longstanding work in our schools to support the well-being of students wasn't as clear to all of our stakeholders as we would want it to be. Our schools are staffed with highly trained professionals offering a multitude of supports to our students each day. And sometimes their work is a little bit invisible. So with the clear encouragement of our board ad hoc committee, we've set out to change that. We want to be certain that every student takes full advantage of the connections and resources of our schools. Next slide. Since I get time with all of you today, I get to brag a little bit about some of the work that our student services folks done last year. You know, these folks are school psychologists, school social workers, school nurses, and school counselors. They're always a group that I can't say enough about, and last year was no exception. These are some of the highlights of the investments that the board and MMSD has made in mental health and well-being. Our goal with the campaign we're going to share today is to further the impact of these partnerships and work streams. So a few things that are highlighted on the slide in front of you. We were able to work towards the launch of our school-based health centers with hiring 2 of 4 therapists for 4 of our comprehensive-based schools. We screened almost 5,000 students for trauma and other mental health symptoms. We had multitudes of groups and individual interventions with students. We did this in work with in partnership with 9 community agencies. We also, of course, train multitudes of staff in all of these programs and partnerships so that all these this work could be done with high fidelity and with high quality for all of our students. The thing that I'm going to highlight last here is that we really spent a lot of time boosting our mental health navigation supports for our students and families. We know that the work that there's a current shortage of services in the community. And so we've really worked to beef up the access that students and families have so that they can work with our school staff to make sure that we're connecting them to resources both within and outside of school. We just know that that is a key to making sure that students and families are accessing services across the continuum. All right, next slide, Jesse. So this lists a few of the goals that we set out to accomplish from this Department of Staff and Student Support in partnership with our district communications team. We've been working with a community partner to accomplish the goals that are listed here. Just to highlight a few of them, we're really working to increase the awareness of school-based mental health services. We really want to highlight the mental health staff expertise that we have in our schools, letting families know you have a lot of people on your side right here in your school. And also to really think about how important those universal proactive well-being strategies are that we're sharing in simple, consistent language that's really easily translated. So really working on access on a whole bunch of different levels. This company we've been working with has really taken our work in MMSD and created a brand to package and highlight that work that we've already been doing in a more accessible format. Next slide. So I'm excited today to share a preview of our mental health and well-being brand. We've been working with stakeholders, including students and school-based staff, to create and modify this campaign. This is the beginning of some ongoing work that we'll be engaging in to make sure that we're hitting the right targets as we go. This awareness campaign centers on teaching families and students that they can get help right in their school. This is particularly important as we know that not all students and families have been clear about what supports are available and how to access them, despite many historic efforts. We know we all learn differently and we often need more than one invitation. So we will have multiple methods and entry points in knowing how to get support. We're also focused on moving past just reactive mental health and moving into proactive awareness. Everyone has mental health just as they all have physical health. We can teach these skills, we can strengthen these abilities to help everyone, not just those in crisis. And lastly, we can really work to destigmatize mental health through consistent, clear messaging. Over time, when someone sees the 5 to Thrive logo that we're presenting tonight, they'll know that it's a mental health and well-being communication, and we can really link that to awareness about content and connection to resources. One of the things that I really like about this is that this is a brand that ties into the district strategic plan and tagline, ensuring continuity with district messaging. So this is really meant to be embedded in the work that we're already doing as a district. Next slide. So here's a preview of some of the materials that we will have available to schools. They will include consistent, simple language across our website pages, printed materials, brochures, posters, postcards, and more. And we'll also use this as a way to support our internal training to staff. It really relies on reduced jargon that might overwhelm, confuse, or create upset with families and students. We know that sometimes we can get a little wordy or complicated or unnecessarily complicated as we try to describe some of these things to our families and students and all our stakeholders, right? Our school-based staff, our school board, lots of stakeholders that we're thinking about here. So this is just a preview. We're completing this work and the content is still being shifted as well. And we know that we're need to design and we're in the process of thoughtful rollout on behalf of our schools, including necessary training and supports. But while we had this opening tonight, we wanted to give you a little bit of preview of what's to come. So watch for more to come. And now would be a great time for Tanya to pop on and let us know how this is being thought of from a school perspective. Thanks for being here tonight, Tanya.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Tanya Novotnik. I'm the school psychologist at Blackhawk Middle School. And I participated in the focus groups with this company and Kristen to help build these materials. And I'm really excited about them. I think that we desperately need some consistent messaging across our school district, and this helps alleviate some of the burden on school staff to create that and recreate it every year. And I think that my only wondering about this is just how will it be rolled out? How will it be shared with staff? How will we train people like how to use these materials? But I think we're all really, really excited about using them and having these wonderful materials to share with our stakeholders.
Thanks, Tanya. All right, Cindy, I think back to you.
Thank you so much. So I think hopefully what you heard tonight is just a little bit of what our schools are focused on this year, what we are focused on in order to ensure our schools can do the work they need to do with kids every day, and that we can actually realize the goals that we have set. I am going to turn it back over to Board Member Muldrow, and she will have a discussion with the board.
Cindy, thank you so much for allowing us to jump into the school year with this conversation and showing us that really gorgeous video of everybody's back to school braids. Like, I see a lot of moms put in those hours and you all captured it beautifully. So thank you for that. I want to turn it over to the board. We're having a pretty serious conversation about the things that we want to see improve in our district. And I think confronting those things head on is something that allows for us to really bring our community along with us as our schools get better and better. Board members, what are the things you need from our administration in order to know that we are making progress on our goals and that we are holding ourselves to a high expectation? Board President Nichols, I see your hand.
Thank you. So thank you all for the kind of inside view of how we plan to go after improvement at the district level and the school level. I do have a couple of questions just so I have a better context, and then I can kind of get back to Board Member Muldrow's question. So the first question I have is one of the things I feel like the board has, I guess, over time kind of used has been the strategic framework and looking at the very specific metrics under each goal. And so when you start to talk about the school improvement plan and the district improvement plan having a more narrow focus and it being down to the four-year high school completion, I'm sorry, I just missed the notes. The biliteracy, the math, and the attendance, it doesn't seem like currently matches our strategic framework exactly, and that's okay if there's a shift, but it would be good to know. So when I look at the strategic framework annual report, I see for your high school completion, so that matches. I see a priority metric is percent of students participating in one or more co-curriculars, which doesn't seem to show up in the new focus, or if it does, I would love to hear how. There was a focus on proficient or advanced students on the forward exam in ELA grade 3. So I can hear how that might be in the biliteracy. And then there was also a priority metric on teachers of color. So can you just do the crosswalk for me of like the strategic framework, priority metrics, our goal metrics, and then what's now being monitored in the school improvement plan and plan?
Go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Board President. So while we are prioritizing those areas of schools, many of the metrics that you mentioned are still ones that we will pay attention to and measure. For example, co-curriculars we see as more of an implementation metric versus an outcome metric. So when we talk about outcome metrics, we're talking about the end of the year standardized assessment metrics, and also the ones that are required by DPI, and sometimes also for our schools that are identified as ATSI or TSI. So our schools, as they're developing their SIP, may put co-curricular in as one of their strategies, or in the area that they are going to be monitoring along the way in order to increase attendance, in order to increase high school graduation rates, as an example. At the middle school level, it may be in order to increase literacy, in order to increase attendance. So those metrics that are in our strategic framework are still going to be very important for us. And they are going to support these priority metrics, maybe directly as an in-service to, or also indirectly. So the climate survey is another example. We're still going to do our climate survey, and we're still going to report out on that. But that isn't one of our goal setting metrics that we use for our school improvement. Similarly, retention and hiring of teachers of color. So those goals and metrics will still be works that happen within that are in service of these outcome metrics.
Okay, that does clear things up, I think. So the school improvement plan process is, if I'm understanding, is primarily focused on academics. Right?
In attendance.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm. Yep.
So academics and attendance, and if schools are tracking things like culture, climate, that's in the school improvement plan, but it's not the things that we're monitoring as closely. I don't know. I'm just trying to, maybe my question is like, what in this plan for learning system, what all is in there? And if you're saying there's other things that they can include in their school improvement plan, but it's not related to the 4. Yeah, I think I'm just trying to track. I'm sorry, Member Muldrow, but I'm trying to understand.
Yeah,
how
so
it all
I'll
comes
ask
together.
Mr. Harvey to come up. I'll say one thing and then I'll come up. A
Okay,
lot of the metrics that we have in the strategic framework and that will stay in the school improvement plan, we see them as what we call leading metrics, meaning they are the metrics that will be supporting these outcome metrics. They're setting them up in what we call performance objectives potentially, which is part of our plan for learning. But I'll let Mr. Harvey maybe explain it differently. It's your answer.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So we're tracking all of it, but as Chief stated earlier, we narrowing the focus on what we're putting our arms on right now. Every school, this is just the top line, but every school still have their own set of metrics as a part of it. That makes sense. So when we start talking about plan for learning, it's nothing more than a digital platform that houses the school improvement plan. So the plan is still the same, but how do we get there? How do we monitor? We went to the to the plan so that everyone can see it and monitor both at the school level as well as central office and give feedback on the school improvement plans so we can adjust strategies in order to get to those desired outcomes.
So the plan for learning is the technical aspect.
Yeah, I get that. It's the platform
Correct.
Yes.
that the school improvement plans sit in.
Yes.
And that you're kind of inputting
Yes.
quarterly and at the
It's a
beginning.
live document so they can go in and change anytime or drop in any progress or any updates that they had as well.
Which also allows us to give them real-time feedback.
Okay,
I'll give another example, just the culture and climate, because you mentioned that. And so again, that is the result of our culture and climate survey, I guess, to put it in simple terms, is a progress monitoring metric in order to improve attendance. If I do not feel I belong at school, if I do not feel like I am valued, then I might not come to school, which impacts attendance. So we still are monitoring the results of our culture and climate, but we see that as more of the progress monitoring metric in service of attendance as our overall outcome metric.
okay. I hear you. I'm just like, I have to take it all in. Because it feels like, and I mean, okay, I want to say this. I'm always happy to see us focused on the academics and the attendance because that's what we're here to do. I also feel like we had spent some years also calling out relationships and belonging and culture and climate as a critical piece of what we also needed to attend to. And I hear you saying that that's in service of, I guess I'm just wondering, you know, I remember principals when I was in the district saying like, you focus on what's being measured. Or I'm not saying it quite right, but like, you know, your energy goes to like what you know you need to track.
Mhm.
So anything that comes off of that, yeah, I'm just wondering where the relational part of being in school, like, it doesn't feel like it's as much of a priority.
So
Maybe I'm just,
So that's still there. That's still embedded in the school system themselves. But like I said, we just looked at the metrics, looked at the data and say, how do we really move the needle on the data? So the relationship, the climate, culture, that's still in the school's improvement plans. But this is just where it was an intentional call out on the data. How do we move the data? How do we move the literacy and the numeracy data? But the climate and culture is still embedded inside all systems.
Yeah, I think it's a different organizer, which is, I think, the shift, because that all lives in our strategy component and where we also have performance objectives. So I think it's a shift. It is there. It is there. Like Kristen just talked about the importance of like all of the things we're doing to help realize our SIP. It's there, but I think the way that we have organized it and how we've been thinking about our continuous improvement process, it lives maybe differently than what you are familiar with from.
okay, so I think I'm trying to step back to that question that was on the slide that board member Muldrow asked. I mean, I'm trying to think if the 4 things that you mentioned are gonna help me feel like we're moving in the right direction. Do I think an increase in biliteracy is moving in the right direction? Of course. I think that's gonna look different at elementary, at middle and high. Like when you're thinking about like what kind of feeds up to the overall district metric. The same could be said for math. Attendance looks very different at the grade levels, as you well know. So yeah, I'm just trying to, I think because I can't see what this new platform produces, it's it's hard for me to know if I would feel super confident that we're going in the right direction. But let me think about it a little bit more. Thank you.
Board Vice President Maya Pearson.
Hey, thank you. So I guess I'll answer the question. I'm still trying to formulate my question, like my questions about the slides. I think for me, it's always like the data, not just the data that we're looking to analyze, but like where historically we've been. And then also like what is the plans around if we aren't hitting goals, or if there needs to be adjustments that need to be made in goals, like then what is our responses and whatnot if we need to change. And so for me, that's really important because it helps us to have not just a snapshot of information like at a time, but it's just, is what we're focusing on actually working? Is what we are the things that we are looking to reach, are they actually making an impact? And I think I always think about when we start to set the goals, like what is the impact that we're trying to do? Obviously, it's trying to make sure that kids are educated and that they can grow up and graduate career and community ready. But what does that actually mean? And are these going to get us there? So that's for me. I would like to kind of know what our recourse or what we can do or what we've learned previously to help us move into the future. So it's a lot of things there, but let me know if you need me to list them.
No, I think we got it. I think there's two things I heard, kind of what adjustments have we made based on what we've learned from the past, and then how are we going to know what we are putting forth is actually working. So I think I will turn it over to Carletta or Dr. Ebby to start that conversation, talking about a reflection to how we got here and maybe our action plans and how we're thinking about monitoring along.
So one of the things that school teams are doing and will continue to do is engage in what we call progress monitoring. And what that means is really looking at where we were before and where are we now, doing some positive root cause. What are some things that really work that we need to continue to do? What are some things we need to change? And what are some things we need to stop doing? So teams meet at least once a month to reflect on this and adjust what they're doing along the way. And then we bring all the school teams together with central office supporting this progress monitoring. We do that every quarter to think about these questions that you. Would you like to add anything to that?
Okay, thank you.
Board Vice President Pearson, is that it for your questions? Are you satisfied with the response?
I'm still intaking the information. I think there has been a lot of we've been through a lot of changes and transitions. And I guess for me, it's always how can we do the work better, but also how can we be a little more innovative and really kind of dig deeper at root causes. And so I feel like at the moment it kind of somewhat satisfies it. But if I probably need to ground a deeper question, and I can do that later. So yes, at the moment, yes.
Thank you, Board Vice President Pearson. Board Member Castro.
Thank you. I had two questions regarding some of the mental health. The mental health presentation. The two questions are are schools engaging in any social media like hygiene practices for students? And then the second question is, which was on the tip of my head. Oh yeah. Another source of mental health stress could come from class. So are we sharing any best practices with teachers and other classroom staff on best instruction strategies that does not add to the stress or mental health load of our young people?
Yeah, I can certainly get started with that. And then I think if there's anyone else that can talk a little bit about all the ways we support our teachers to support our students, I think there's a number of levels of what you asked, and I'm grateful that you put those together because they're so important. So as far as the social media hygiene, my short answer is I don't know, but I think so. We have worked a lot to increase our work with like creating middle school advisory lessons. And I know there's a lot of content that has been created to go out to all of our students through that or through health classes and things like that. So I can't speak to any one particular lesson, but I do believe that that has been spoken about, and we've been creating a number of avenues or platforms to be able to share content just like that out for our schools, to our students. I also think that as we're thinking about this campaign that's coming out for the mental health campaign, like this is the exact kind of thing that we can take a topic for and really use to highlight and get it sent out on when we get our website updated and things like that. So I think that, so the answer is that I think we're creating a lot of opportunities, and the specific content, I don't want to say yes or no, but I think I can certainly find out. And I also believe that if it's not there, it can be. And then as far as the best instructional strategies, I think a lot of our work this year, when we've really launched our year within new work for culture and climate, we've really highlighted the importance of building relationships and community within our schools, and really thinking about ways that each classroom starts with social contracts and other types of community building, which is exactly part of what you're talking about as far as best practices within schools and teaching. So I think that's an ongoing conversation of how we make sure we're supporting building that community, building those relationships. And then I think there's a lot of ongoing conversations about things like grading and other best practices that of course relate to exactly what you're getting at. I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to add to, okay.
Savion, did
Got
that?
it. Oh, no, yeah, I was gonna say got it. That did answer. Thank you.
Board Member Mosner Feldman.
Thanks. Thank you for all your work on this. Congratulations on starting the school year. This will be the last time I say it. My children are in MMSD now. It's so exciting. So like, they weren't in the picture, but that's okay. Okay. So I appreciated hearing from my fellow board members and have some similar questions. One thing being like the forward and the ACT metrics come in once a year. So in terms of like, what am I going to need to feel like we're making progress is like definitely more than that. And I think that Board President Nichols, your questions about like, well, where's all this other stuff like embedded under that? So I would love to be hearing about stories from schools. Like, what are those strategies that folks are thinking are going to make a difference? How are they going, right? If we're looking at the metrics regularly, like I would be interested in hearing about how that's going, some sort of like spotlights. And not just necessarily ones that are like going super well, because, we learn from our mistakes too. Speaking of learning from our mistakes, narrowing the focus to these like standardized outcome measures is not a new idea. And it has dangers that go with it. And so I'll be curious to be in conversation about like, what lessons are we learning of the past like 30 years of using standardized assessments in this way that like that we're taking to heart, such that we don't end up in like a drill and kill kind of like teach the test situation. Not that I think any single person would want that. But these are dangers. And to contextualize that a little bit, like this is a danger that is gaining traction around the nation. People are looking to go back to that type of orientation towards schooling that I'm not particularly interested. So I'll be interested to think about like, and to hear about like when that creep comes, how we're combating that with our values as MMSD. So that's some of the stuff I would love to hear about, to know we're on track. Another thing I would love to hear about to know we're on track is staff satisfaction metrics. Like what feedback do we get from SBLTs or from staff about welcome back? What feedback are we getting about these new things that we're trying? So I'd be curious about that. And I think having a practice of like a regular practice of listening to that is helpful for everybody. Other things I would love to hear. I would love to hear when you look at the school improvement plans, where are there strategies that are shared across buildings? And where are there strategies that are really innovative, where like such and such a school is like, hey, you know what I think is really going to make a difference for attendance, because I talked to a bunch of kids about it. Whatever, I don't know, I haven't talked to a bunch of kids about it, but school people have. So I'd be curious about that. Like, where are there things that are in practice across the district, and where are there things that are innovative that we might learn from? And then two more things to offer or ask about. The first is like something I'm super excited to hear about, that the consistent language around mental health supports sounds awesome. I've seen that type of really work in several different settings. And I think that's going to pay off a lot. I'm excited to see where that goes. And then similar to what Board Member Castro asked about, like mental health struggles don't come from nowhere. When it affects 40% or more of high school students. And so I have two thoughts about that. So I concur with Board Member Castro's question about like, what are the instructional practices that we're doing? And I'm hoping to hear that like, as we learn from students who become more aware of the supports that we offer, what are the structural issues in our schools that lead mental health struggles? How as a system, we're saying, okay, you don't like changing classes 7 times because it's stressful and you have 40 minutes in your class and that's no way to learn. What are we doing? And I know people have heard me talk about scheduling stuff a lot of times. How are we taking what they're learning, what they're telling us, now that we're gonna like ask them and really bring them in on this in this really cohesive way to make changes to our system? Likewise, to what extent are we like, as a district, going to be able to be really serious about the fact that feelings of like sadness and helplessness are not necessarily things that you can strategize your way out of in the political context we're in the environment. So I want to be hearing about and want to be moving as a city. If we take these mental health challenges seriously, what are our citywide climate catastrophe answers? What are our big changes to how we're going to do school that have a long-term impact on how our teenagers and young people, I'm always thinking about teenagers, but how the young people in our city are. I don't think I asked any like specific questions, just offered my thoughts. I'm really excited about it, and congratulations.
I'll just make one comment.
Yeah, of course, always.
I think one of the things that we are excited about with the Plan for Learning platform is the ability to have insight into all of our schools in an easy way versus trying to dig through Google folders and all of that, to see where schools are being differentiated in their strategies, and also where they are in terms of monitoring the quarterly action plans that are showing us who's doing a great job of being on track with their goals. So I appreciate everything else that you said, and I think those are all things we will see possibilities of bringing back to the board for updates. But one of the exciting things about this platform allows us to do so.
Right, so in addition to, all the principals have an opportunity to look at all the other schools. So we're already sharing strategies across schools, we're sharing best practices, but it gives them more opportunity to see what others do and replicate those strategies, the innovative strategies.
So when we talk about things that we learned from the past, that's one of the things that we learned. They didn't have that same type of access previously to be able to share across all 50 schools. And so they do have that.
Also, they can see each other.
They can see each other.
Yeah.
It's a central platform.
For sharing and borrowing.
Right.
Thank you, Board Member Mosner Feltman. Is your hand still up or? Okay. Board Member Vandermeulen. And I want to add myself to the stack after you.
Yes, my first comment is on the mental health. Thank you for taking that as seriously as you do. As someone who's been open about her mental health issues, it's absolutely essential. And when you have 40% of teenagers, as my colleague Blair said, it's not a choice anymore, it's a necessity. What I'm worried about in the strategic framework and these plans is as follows. One, we're doing the reading and math based again on test scores. We all know on test scores, we've all heard that on how it is not good for Black and brown students. It's not. It's also created by the possibly one of the more ableist ways of teaching, as it was created by the eugenics movement. In fact, some of those tests, Stanford Binet was created in 1889 to determine whether or not French children were intelligent enough to go to school or to be institutionalized. Do we really think it is a forward thinking to base it on that? I do seriously wonder about that. That's me, that's not you guys, that's just a belief in the system that I've always had some questions on. My other issue is I'd like to be able to see those SIPs to make sure that we can see and compare from one school to the other to make sure that the data is doing what the data says it's doing. I'm not a statistician. I'm not going to micromanage the data. I don't want to micromanage the data, frankly. But I just want to see what schools could possibly need help and where the board can always help and collaborate with admin on that issue. And most importantly, and this is going to sound probably cliche as heck, but I want to let teachers teach. I don't always want the canned curriculum, sometimes the standardized curriculum that sometimes happens. We've managed to avoid it so far, but it sometimes happens when you try to focus solely on math literacy. You get, as Blair put it best, the teaching to the test. I don't want to see that. I don't want to lose the creativity and the inspiration of our teachers. So I'm not sure how that's done. Possibly you include teachers in it to say how they can improve, because right now I'm hearing from teachers this first week about a lot of things, about going back to school, about large class sizes. But the number one complaint I'm hearing are principals going in and asking, how many lamps do you have? Well, I'm not sure how that's really responsive to learning. And I think we need to focus on that part. But that's me.
Thank you. So I'll just provide a couple quick responses. So one, I think it's important for everybody to understand that while we're prioritizing these areas as school improvement plan, that is not the only work that is happening. I also respect what Board President Michelle said in terms of sometimes that's what we focus on. The area of arts is still a priority for us as a system, different coursework, our physical education, our social emotional learning. So all of that is still work that is happening in the system. The second thing I just wanted to lift is our school improvement plans are living documents, so they're ever evolving. If there is something you might think about in terms of showing a sample of what a school improvement plan looks like in Plan for Learning, or providing an update to the board in terms of what trends we're seeing, those are things we can take. And I can talk to board member Muldrow about that and where that might fit.
Sounds great. Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks.
That's it for me. Let me figure out how to take down my hand.
If I could just add something.
Of course.
Nikki, you had talked a little bit about understanding the SIPs more deeply, and this team is committed to bringing information back on a quarterly basis with some trends and themes from the SIPs.
Great.
Your living, breathing documents, this team I know is committed to that. And just as a response, I've just been thinking about Beth Vade, I know who's on the call and has just been sharing some information with me. Is that we also, first of all, I agree with you, and this notion of sort of compliance around these summary assessments isn't the best way we know children, and is certainly not the best way that we that our teachers use their craft of teaching, right, to actually make a difference in their lives. So that's why it's important that all of those strategies and all of the things that live in that portal underneath these bigger achievement goals really come into play. I also want to say we want to stay consistent with ESSA and the requirements at the federal and state level, right? We actually have to have some monitoring towards that, but that's not the main reason that we have our school improvement plans, right? So Beth was just reminding me that there is some, we actually have to, we monitor that and you'll see these people monitoring that, the team monitoring that, but we know those summative summary assessments are not the way to get at the right meaningful bites of learning that kids do all of the time. So I just wanted to interject and say thank you. I know you spoke of that, Blair, you spoke of that too. And just to be real about that, there is some of this we have to comply with. We can do that with this, but the most important, right, movement is those movements that kids make over time. And we'll be able to share some of that during the quarterly report. So thank you for letting me interject on it.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Kupstad. Board Member Vandermeulen, do you feel your questions have been addressed?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few things that I would like to highlight as things I'm hoping come back to the board as we continue to monitor our progress. So in terms of attendance, I am curious how transportation impacts attendance. I heard from several parents last week that they were struggling to send their kid to school, that their kid had waited so long for a bus that they had walked home and not attended school. So I have some concerns about whether or not how you get to school becomes a factor in your attendance. And I think that that's something we need to pay close attention to. The other thing I want to elevate when we're talking about attendance is COVID and illness. We're seeing a real surge in COVID right now. And I think I got an email from an educator saying we need to bring back COVID leave for our teachers because of how frequently folks are being diagnosed with COVID right now. And I think that will impact attendance as it has for the last few years. And so I would like those two factors to come back to the board in consideration of how they impact our ability to improve in these areas. For math, I really appreciate that we're going to focus on math this year. I think that's incredibly exciting. The area I'm most interested in leaning into is the elementary area. And I think it's not just that we improve who is proficient in the area of math or who is getting good grades in math, but also that we really look at who's included in advanced opportunities in the area of math in elementary school. And so are we looking to ensure that young women and people of color and girls of color particularly are identified and recognized as talented and gifted in the area of math? Are we improving who has opportunities to be an advanced learner in the area of math? And how are we doing that? And what is the data that will come forward for the board to be able to recognize that shift specifically? In the area of high school completion, I do not think monitoring high school completion in and of itself is enough. I think monitoring what that means for our students. So when we say kids graduate college, career, and community ready, what does that mean? What is the average GPA of a student who graduates from this district? Does that change based on their identity? How many of our students graduate with their driver's license? How many of our students graduate registered to vote? How many of our students graduate with the ability to speak, write, and read in multiple languages? What are the material benefits of graduating from MMSD? We hand you a diploma. What does that mean for most of our kids? That is information I'd like to see come back to us. In terms of early literacy or our literacy goal, I'm hoping we can really have an understanding of what percentage of our educators have been trained in letters, how many of them continue to work for this district, because that's been an ongoing process of training people over the course of years. What does it look like for our kids who have a teacher who has that letters professional development versus our students who do not? So what does that look like? And in terms of the materials that we purchased last year, there was a lot of excitement about those materials. And this is kind of the first year that we get to roll them out and see how kids feel about those stories, about that access to writing and reading. And I'm curious how we'll measure the impact of those materials as we move forward in terms of biliteracy. I want to acknowledge the comments around standardized testing from my fellow board members. I greatly appreciate elevating that standardized testing is not the only way that we can capture the success of our schools. My question for right now in this moment is when we're talking about kind of making our schools more coherent or making things more consistent at our schools, it is hard for me not to hear that we are thinking about kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to our schools. We have very different schools. We have very diverse students. There's a big difference between, what kids need at one school versus another, what any individual child needs in a classroom. So how are we going to accommodate the unique needs of schools while we build towards coherence? What if something works really well at one school because that population is very successful when we implement that strategy, and tanks at another school really is not something that works well for the kids? What are we going to do if that happens? I guess I'll direct my question at Cindy Green, and then I am curious in terms of our Department of Research and Innovation, how they will support this work and support the questions from board members this evening.
Sure, absolutely. I will start. I think what's really important that you mentioned, Board Member Muldrow, is what we believe in coherence is what is essential that every student receives, not necessarily how to receive it. So being able to contextualize for the local setting is very important. I think a lot about where our schools are situated and the local partners they have access to in that area, or how family members come in and support. So we are saying that what is essential and what is universal, I guess, is core instruction and these core components that every student must receive, that every student deserves. Further learning, grade level standards, for example, grade level expectations, how those are implemented and facilitated are through each school's unique SIP when they're thinking about the strategies, when they're thinking about the contextualized programming that happens at their school. Nuestro Mundos is going to look a lot different than Cherokee Heights might look like at a middle school. So I think that's where there still is the autonomy of schools. The second thing I will say of why we think coherence is also absolutely essential is due to the high mobility that we have at our schools. And with high mobility, we want to ensure as our students kind of transition in and out of different MMSD sites, they are able to smoothly transition in and be at a place where there is some consistency in terms of what is being learned, not necessarily how. So hopefully that answers your question for that piece. And again, at the different levels, it looks different. Our partnerships at the high school level vary based on pathways, based on post-secondary options and all of that. So that is all contextualized. There's
I really appreciate that you brought up pathways, because
Mhm.
my understanding is that we have pathways at 3 out of 6 of our high schools, right? So that would be an area where we're not particularly consistent.
That is correct. For personalized pathways, 3 of our 6 high schools have personalized pathways, health services, and the information technology. Correct.
Okay.
What I was going to say was our referendum spaces vary across high schools, allows for individual contextualizing and some autonomy. I'm going to pause because Miss Stanford Taylor, not Miss Stanford Taylor. We just have this conversation or Carletta. Let me just start. Let me so formal. So Carletta would like to chime in, and then we'll see if Beth wants to join for the research side based on your other question.
I just wanted to add some intentional shifts that have been made from a systems level, especially as it relates to the assistant superintendents and the work that they're going to be doing with principals. So I think Board Member Muldrow, this really speaks to what are we doing to address the specific needs of the schools. And so associate superintendents are working directly in schools for a minimum of 3 days per week, where they're directly going in to the building, working with the principal, doing coaching, also doing problem solving, and being critical, critical partners in the work that's occurring in the building. We also have PLCs, which are professional learning communities that principals have the opportunity to participate in, which means that they have a problem of practice that they can get together and discuss and also problem solve around. That's also an opportunity for them to have conversations around what are those best practices that are happening in buildings that can be shared across campuses as well. So there's just been some systems work that we've done as well in how schools are being supported. We are doing walkthroughs as a central office with central office folks going in, not just to see what's happening as kind of a check, but also for our learning. So for the things that we are expecting schools to do, how is that being implemented in the building? What can we learn from that? And again, what are those best practices that we can share across schools to be able to address the different needs that buildings might have?
Thank you. Beth, I see you jumped on. Thank you.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. So everyone else has covered this really pretty brilliantly, but I'll just chime in with kind of 2 thoughts. One is really just thinking about sort of these tenets of improvement science that we've been using to ground sort of how are we setting up this process, what types of data do we use, and how do we use it? And I think one of our kind of key tenets in improvement science really is around addressing variations. You want to be able to see where variation is in the system, and then you want to think about what's leading to that and how can we reduce that in the key outcomes that we have. And so what's exciting about this plan for learning platform and this sort of SIP approach that we're taking is that we are going to have the ability to look across the system in a much more, I would say, consistent way across some key metrics that we think really matter. And while doing that, it's going to allow us to see the spaces both where we're going to need to put more support, but also where things are going very well. And we should be learning and spreading those practices under the right conditions. So that consistent data set will help us be able to see it in these performance objectives. But where the real magic will happen is at the strategy level. So that will be the place where schools will have the chance to think about their unique needs, set up strategies that make sense for their students and their staff, and monitor those with data sets that are really going to be much more live time, much more able to make those changes consistently. So if it's helpful to think, I think it's going to end up doing both of those things. You're going to be able to accommodate those unique needs of schools through choosing strategies that make sense and the right data to monitor those strategies, while while also building towards coherence by using sort of this common set of metrics that allows us to address variation when we see it. So that's kind of the piece I would add.
Thank you so much for speaking to that and for speaking to the component of the strategy that we embrace to ensure that we are making progress and really talking about how that's where we're going to have the ability to maneuver in real time. So I greatly appreciate your leadership, everybody who spoke to my questions and who spoke to our school improvement plans. My last statement will be on attendance. The other factor I think we need to take into consideration when it comes to attendance is who gets pulled out of class, who gets suspended, who gets sat in the hallway, who gets sent to the principal's office. It's really hard to learn if you are constantly being reprimanded, if you are constantly in trouble. And so it's great if a kid shows up at the beginning of the day and gets home at the end of the day, but that doesn't ensure that they got to participate fully in class. And so if we don't look at those factors and start thinking like pulling students out of class is a last resort, because we want young people in class, we want young people learning, and we want them to have the support to stay in class as a priority. So I appreciate the emphasis on attendance, but I think that there's multiple factors I would really love for us to take into consideration as we look at that goal specifically. Moving on, we get to have a really cool conversation about mental health and wellness. I want to thank the board members who have kind of foreshadowed the importance of this conversation and turn it back over to you, Cindy Green.
Thank you so much. So I think at this point, unless there are no other questions, I'm going to thank my team members that have been here and others. And then I think we will transition to transportation.
Board members, I'm not seeing any other questions specific to mental health. So I feel like we're in a good place to transition to transportation.
Thank you.
Cindy, as we transition to transportation, am I turning it back over to you? Am I turning it back over to Cedric?
Let's start with our superintendent. She, I think, will kick us off and then she'll turn to the team. Sound good?
My apologies, Superintendent Cookstead.
Board Member Muldrow, no worries. I will start it off a little bit, and I want to thank the transportation team for being here. We also have some representatives from our transportation company for student here, so I look forward to having a productive conversation. So I just wanted to frame the conversation up a little bit before we begin. And I wanted to start with what I know we all agree on. And we all agree that student transportation is important and it must be done well every day. We agree, Board Member Muldrow, something that you just said, we agree that it is a critical supporting condition for learning. We agree that students and parents count on us. And we acknowledge that in the first week, really last week, and moving into this week, there have been multiple challenges that we've all experienced. So in the spirit of transparency, I just want to be clear, and I want to be really open when things are going well and when things are challenging for us. And I know the team has great trust and respect in the board and in our community to have those conversations together. And that's what we're doing tonight. We're working as a team, as I know you know, to minimize the situations that have been occurring when they have occurred, and we've been working to try and fix them or do something. We communicate with every single person who contacts us by email, calling. We respond. Sometimes it's Cedric's and Kenneth's team. Sometimes it's for students. Sometimes it's us. Our team is working really hard to manage the complexities. And I am learning a ton about transportation logistics, sometimes late at night while I'm in my pajamas on a call, but I'm learning a ton about it. I have great respect for the work that's happening. So to the MMSD transportation team, I just want to say thank you. We see you and we appreciate and acknowledge the work you're doing and are going to continue to work with you. So as a part of the framing, just want folks to know we're actively managing this and that this truly is an implementation issue. It's not a policy issue. This is about implementation. And we're working very closely with our bus company. And we are acknowledging and apologizing for the frustrations that we know some of our students and families have been experiencing. Busing is a foundational piece of how we do business. Getting students to and from school safely is critical. And I know that we share these goals together. And I just wanted to acknowledge and frame that up before we start. We've been working hard, care very much, and we want to hear from you tonight about how maybe we can do some things better and share some data with you about how things are going. So just logistically, as a team, they've been working on this even before I came, when we made the decision to switch contractors last spring. The last time we had a new bus company, we had about 1.5 years prep before we actually moved forward. So just acknowledging that we were working within a little bit more compressed time frame here, and that we are looking at a lot of different routes to try to logistically take care. So as we move into our discussion, I do want to caution all of us against drawing overly broad conclusions about people, their level of effort and their concern. Every day we treat as a new day for our grownups and our children. And we want this conversation to be helpful, working together as thought partners, rather than amplifying maybe things that have gone wrong that we all know. We can talk about those in a way based on data that get us to a better place. So I just wanted to acknowledge some of those things before we start. And Ali, I will pass this off to you to maybe start with a question or comment to move our conversation.
I just want to thank you for your leadership, Superintendent Kustad, and for every word you just said. I appreciate that you started with our salient agreements and shared values. I also think that this is a moment in which I am hoping our board can work with our administration and our partner to support our young people, right? To really center what this is like for our kiddos. I think last week was challenging, but I think the really challenging part of last week was folks wondering if this will improve long-term. I think when you have a hard start, people start to go, wait, what happens when it's 6 degrees outside and my 7-year-old is waiting for the bus and I got to get to work? What is that going to look like? And so I think one of the things I'm really hoping is that we can assure people throughout this conversation that the road bumps we hit last week on those sunny days in Wisconsin are not going to be the same in December or January or February. So we knew that this transition would be challenging. We talked about it a lot. Board members had real hesitation and concern around what this was going to look like. Can we talk through a little bit about what we're doing right now to make sure this week is different than last week and that we continue to improve as we move forward throughout the school year? And then I know my board colleagues have questions about transportation as well, or have heard feedback from our community around transportation that we want to uplift.
Thank you, Board Member Muldrow. And I will hand it over to our transportation team to perhaps give some data and strategies around how things have changed over the past week for our students and families.
Absolutely.
You don't have to.
Take my mute off.
There we go.
All right.
You have to turn off. Like F.
Mike's in the room.
Everybody, is that better?
Much.
Okay, good.
There you go.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Superintendent Kavistad. And to the board, I appreciate this time to be before you. I know I own the fact that we have had a lot of challenges in the last week. It is my sincere apologies that we are having this and our families are being subject to late buses and things of that nature. Definitely wasn't the plan that we intended to start the school year. However, we have seen some incremental improvement from last Friday to today. I think one of the biggest challenges was the communication piece. I think when finding out information and cascading that to schools and families in a timely manner has been a challenge that we're working to overcome daily. I think that may be like the biggest single issue when people don't know. So I think information sharing in a timely manner has gotten better. And hopefully parents understand a little bit. I think the other aspect is looking at the carrier and our expectations for them and providing them as much information and data that we can as far as our current processes internally and getting that information to them timely so that they can move. But I think that we've seen a lot of things that are driving this are around just sheer numbers of drivers. I'll allow the carrier to speak more to that. But I think moving forward, my team has been really great and working long hours to make sure that we are getting our kids routed, making sure that we are looking at routes to make them more safer and more efficient. I think from an internal standpoint, that is the part that we are looking to help out, is just making sure that we are making the routes as efficient as we can with the circumstances that we're facing right now.
So I just want to ask a pretty specific question. When you say communication was one of the major issues, what should parents expect from communication? Are parents going to know, hey, my child's bus is running an hour behind that the morning, by 7 a.m.? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically we work with the carrier. We have 2 report outs. We have an evening report out. Want to know what exactly were the hiccups, how we overcoming those for the next day. And then by 5 a.m. every morning, we need to know if all routes are covered. And if not, what is the plan of attack? I think that we try to use that model to give us a couple hours at least, or at least an hour to get that information out of our team. Typically, I touch base with TJ and Ian in my communications department to get them that information as soon as possible, right after their 5 a.m. email. There is some challenges I think that they face with between 5 a.m. and when the driver check-in comes about. And then at that point, if anything's changed, it's much more difficult to get that information out before routes are set to run.
So Kenneth, do I hear you saying that those early morning hours is when communication goes out to families if a route will be late or delayed?
Absolutely. We try to get that out roughly around 5 a.m. If we get any information from the carrier that is going to change from the norm.
I see several board members' hands up, so I'm going to hear from Board Member Vandermeulen and then Board Vice President Pearson.
Thank you. I appreciate Kenneth. I appreciate Lisa, and I appreciate the apology. I think that does go ways, because I know that there are a lot of terrified parents out there, and there were quite a few. Can we text the users? For example, I know we text parents in case of emergencies. Can we create a bus text system? So if, say, the orange route happens to be late, go down or cut, that they could be notified in real time. Is that a possibility with what we have?
I mean, I think that's what we're going towards. I think that's the goal, is to use the technology at hand to make sure that future times that that parents are notified in real time. That's part of the package that we have forthcoming. At this very moment, I think with the way we had to pivot with the driver shortage, I think right now our goal is to make sure that we have drivers and cover the routes. But that is something that we are working towards with the parent view app.
I worry about parents on getting to work because they often may need more than an hour notice. I also worry about our special needs students, especially our nonverbal one, where and I was talking to Mr. Harvey about this, if you have a nonverbal child and was dropped off at the wrong location, they can't tell you. And how we need to focus on that, especially because that information is not going to be relayed back by the child. You can't.
I think Kenneth, or maybe it was Cedric I was talking to, that the transportation for students who have special education needs takes up a significant amount of, right, the transportation efforts that are out there, and that particular work stream around students with special education needs, that's actually had a lot of success.
We have.
Not 100% success, but actually, I think one of you said that we're actually seeing a lot more success over time with that than we have with regular routing. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think.
Just to respond to.
I think I think being a smaller sector of our population, student population that we transport, it's had less changes. I think, so we've seen a lot of success there from day one, and it's gotten better. I think there's still hurdles that we have to overcome with the ability to make sure that we are meeting the needs specified in each child's specific transportation plan. But I think overall, we've actually seen more success out of the gate with the special education than we have with the regular education. And to your point, I agree. I think each and every student that we transport, we have to take special care. I think with our special education team, they do a really good job at making sure all those specific information points for that child are in their individual routes. So we do a really good job at communicating that aspect of those children. I think we really look to make sure, to the best of our ability, is that we, in a specific instance like that, where a child is nonverbal, that if we have a attendant, and hopefully, in the event that we don't have an attendant, hopefully we can provide a staff member. We have had staff members that were willing to ride with those students to make sure that they got to and from their stops.
Board Chair, may I add a suggestion along with my questions quickly?
Nikki, yeah, the floor is yours right now.
Beautiful. My suggestion also would be, and this is pretty cost effective, put a letterboard in.
Repeat that.
It's put a letterboard in, a simple board of letters where they can point to and look at the letters to tell you what they want to say.
Absolutely. I had a gentleman that had that on his wheelchair. He was nonverbal, but he couldn't write, but he could spell out what he needed.
Because some individuals can, some can't, but I mean, that's one way until we get everything.
It's a great idea.
Organized. Also, what are our problem routes? Can we notify the parents on those routes first, because those are the most likely to have problems, so they're aware in advance?
Yeah, I think the issue there is it's not consistent. We have seen some routes that have been consistently, there's been issues consistently with them, but it's just been a driver is not available. A driver may have called off that we're seeing. We're trying to keep, because we have so many new drivers, we have the first student has pulled drivers from all across the country to help out with this account. They're not familiar with the routes as if, they've been doing it for a year. So we're trying to minimize mistakes by keeping the same driver on the same route. But if that driver doesn't show up, we have to then move. It's just a logistical, kind of. It logistically it becomes difficult, but I think we're trying to minimize, we've actually taken some good data that's showing us some of the consistent problem routes. For instance, the Wright Orange route, I know, for instance. So now we look at the route itself and say, how can we optimize that route? Is it the routing itself? Do we need to change the stop locations? Anything, if we can get 3 to 5 minutes back off that route, that will help the driver. So we're looking at all of those options.
You mentioned the orange route, which I was going to ask, but you already beat me to it. Additionally, I worry, besides the orange route, I worry about any route that crosses a major highway, whether it be Lakeview. Thank you for the walking school bus. But again, we're gonna need full bus service at some point there, and it's pretty remote. Lindbergh is pretty remote. So I don't want people crossing PD.
Agreed, yes.
I don't want me crossing PD. I'm a non-driver and a pedestrian, and I seriously worry on my safety. This isn't a kid thing. This is just a public safety thing.
Yeah, when we talk about, that aspect of it, I think that's as far as how do we overcome that. I think that's a question for first student with the drivers, like how are we going to get more drivers into those things? Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate the help that people have done to step up in the district to help us out. Principals that have driven, assistant or principals that have ridden with me to make sure that we get in the Western Window. Josh forehand.
The Senate principal was amazing.
Dr. Copeland, yeah. So I think just seeing that itself is inspiring. But yeah, I agree that we need to figure that out. And I think that's a question as far as the drivers shortage, how first student plans to handle that.
And I have one last question, Chair, and that would be this week, are we expecting significant delays on most routes?
Once again, I think I would bring in first student to answer that. We're looking for them at every day to figure that out.
Sounds
great. As of this morning, there's a couple of things that I want to cover. First of all, thanks again for having us and engaging in the dialogue tonight. We really appreciate it. As far as on-time performance goes, this morning, in concert with the MMSD team and actually the entire MMSD staff, they've been kind of keeping track of arrivals. And as of this morning, we were about 91% on time on the yellow bus side of things. And we continue to be at or above 95% on time on the special education transportation service. And that continues to get better. Last week, we were tracking the PM data starting on Thursday and Friday. We were at about 93% on time on Thursday, and that went up to about 93.5% on time on Friday. So we're continuously seeing improvements there. And I really do want to highlight the work that Ken and his team are doing in collaboration with us to really start identifying, right? We see that there's groups of routes that are performing on time. They're performing on time in the morning, they're performing on time in the afternoon. And we're starting to be able to hone in on where we're having real challenges with the route themselves, or potentially with the routes that the drivers are taking to get there, or between first and second tier, how they're navigating that, or other challenges. And we're starting to dig into those problems. And we've also brought on an individual from our team. We have a routing services group called First Planning Solutions. And he's been helping to look at some of the routes in the routing software that we use to see from his vantage point, kind of a national scale, anything that doesn't look right, or any efficiencies that we can capitalize on. And has also kind of jumped in to make some of the route changes that the drivers have been recommending in order to make the routes run as efficiently as possible. And then the one other thing that I did want to mention is that on the special education side of things, we continue to see better progress with hiring. And a lot of that comes from the fact that those drivers, although they meet the same strict training standards that First Student has in place for all driving candidates, they do not have to obtain a CDL, whereas yellow school bus drivers have to obtain a yellow CDL, or have to obtain a full CDL. And I think I was reading something this morning, and the Wisconsin School Bus Association is still reporting that school districts throughout Wisconsin are about 15 to 20% short in terms of all drivers that they need. So we're continuing to perform better than that. And obviously the resources that Ken talked about with trying to get all 129 routes on the street every single day really does help get students to school. But we're still plugging away at training. We've got resources in from pretty much on the training side from all over the Midwest to help with the intensive training that's required for an individual to get their CDL. And we've got about 16 people in that pipeline right now in various phases and stages. And then we have an even greater number, about 3 times that number, in pre-hire phases. So that's before they start training, whether it's being interviewed or waiting for their background check to clear. And then in the first 10 days of school, we've also had about 33 applications come through as a result of our continued efforts, but probably community members that are seeing what's the challenges that are out there and kind of responding to that and wanting to make a difference. So just some key points there about things that we're seeing in the efforts that we're taking in the partnership with the entire MMSD team to try to get kids to school safely and on time every day.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Is that it for your questions?
It is. Thank you, Chair.
Board Vice President Pearson.
Yeah, thank you. I first want to just give gratitude to the admin and really tackling this and being very, very responsive to our families. I think it is important to do that. But with that, I will ask a question, and I'm not exactly sure who to ask this to. I believe it might be student services, but also maybe tech. I know that when the announcements, when routes are tardy or that there might be a route that is missing or whatnot, the communications go out to the schools, and then the schools then are tasked then to send that information out to the families. What I know that at registration, so my kids are in MMSD, at registration, we have to, elect to get text messages, emails from the district for any updates and whatnot. How are we ensuring that families, one, are signed up so that if there are delays that the school is sending out, that communication is being readily sent out? I know I got multiple text messages and emails from Wright Middle School, even though my kids don't take the bus, they walk. But what are we doing to make sure that families are actually receiving that information in real time, one? And if families aren't signed up, if that is the requirement, how are we ensuring that families are signed up so that they can receive communications from the district? So that's my first question.
I don't think that I have the answer for that right now. That would be us and comms conversation. So I think we frame the information and how it gets to the schools and parents. It's not exactly, something that we know exactly about.
Yeah, so whoever wants to answer that, I think it is important because we've been receiving a lot of emails and families have been asking what is the protocol? So if folks can answer that so that families hear that.
Maya, that's a really interesting, if I could jump in here, that's a really interesting piece of feedback. And I wonder if we can't go back and maybe if it's through another portion of the registration process, I guess, Mike Herding, I'm looking at you too to do some problem solving on this. If there's something that we can do in the enrollment office to confirm the ways that families prefer to be communicated with, especially around transportation. I'm just wondering, Mike, if that's something that we can look into to update all of those lists.
Yeah, as you raise that question, Maya,
it's really interesting.
I thought that was an excellent question. Yeah. And as a longtime administrator, I don't recall that we've had a good system to double check to make sure parents have updated that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it might be within the enrollment process as they check out. But I do think it's a great question of, are we making sure? And it is a struggle, I know, sometimes for schools to know which number to call as numbers change and which email. So we need to do some more work, but I appreciate raising that because I really am not sure all of the venues we use to confirm that we have the right kind of.
Okay, thank you for that response and being honest. I think that that's something that, you know, as we are looking to ensure that communication from our schools to our families is secure, but also ensuring that they're getting the information in real time. I think that is a worthwhile way to look at it. I'm not exactly sure if that is the space that it lives in. I just remember checking boxes at enrollment, and I get text messages about parent meetings and other kind of like newsletters and those kind of feedback. So it's not only transportation, but I have been getting a lot of transportation updates, and I don't know. And that's why I wanted just to pose that, because I'm a board member, but also a parent as well. And this is just some of the things that I've been seeing, but wanted to know if we have a good way to ensure that that happens. My next question is that, and this is mostly going to be posed to first students. I know that we were assured that staffing levels, and not just only staffing everyday buses, but even if folks were out sick or if there were emergencies that bus drivers had to, that there would always be some kind of overflow of bus drivers. And I understand the shortage. And I mean, we're having shortages everywhere for almost every industry. However, that was one of the points that we were very, I would say, very vocal about and very stern about, ensuring that we had folks that can cover these routes. And so I guess, what is the strategy that you all are using? One, to ensure that we get to that 99 to 100%, and two, what are you guys doing in terms of recruiting if right at this moment we're unable to do that? Just so as we go into the winter months, as Chair Ali mentioned, that families feel secure that their child is going to get from home to school and from school to home.
Yeah, that's a completely fair question, and I appreciate you acknowledging the staffing challenges. I think in the last board update that I sent out to the group, or that was sent to you, that came from me, showed that we were about 2 drivers short from where we needed to be. And since then, obviously, right, things change as we lead up to the start of school, with routes that were changed or additional routes coming on. And then on our end, right, when we actually have drivers and it's the first day of school on September 1st, subsequently on September 5th, there's drivers that kind of change and their schedule goes from all day to just being an AM driver or just a PM driver or getting another opportunity. And we saw some of those shifts, right? So on paper, we had enough drivers with the drivers that we were bringing in from out of town to cover all the routes that were given to us. And then we looked at staff and how that would play in. And since then, there's just been some of those changes. So we've been working through that. Although, right, stating the percentage shortage that I stated in my last comments, we're not quite there, right? We're doing better than I think, you know, the whole. But to speak specifically about what we're doing from a recruiting standpoint, it's kind of a full court press on recruiting. So it all started with the wages that we brought to the market, starting at $24 an hour, and the sign-on bonus that we have. But then it's just kind of a multifaceted approach. We recognize that not only do we need to be out in the community recruiting, but we need to have a strong online presence. So we utilize quite a few online tools to ensure that our job advertisement here in Madison for all open positions, whether it be non-CDL driver, yellow bus driver, attendants, mechanics, all of those things, that they make it through all of the various online places, job boards, those sorts of things, where folks go and look. And we've had really strong applicant return, but it really does come down to the training process. So we have a pretty comprehensive process in place. It's a complete onboarding process of bringing individuals in, having them meet with our what we call a location ambassador, and that location ambassador really handholds them from the time that they walk in the door all the way through getting them into our official training pipeline, and then keeps them engaged throughout the process in order to ensure that when they enter in what can be kind of a scary process, there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of appointments and qualifications and tests and things like that, that we really want them to be comfortable with. So we do everything that we can to move them through that process, to give them the confidence they need to pass all of the different tests and exams they need to pass, and then ultimately to make them comfortable driving a route with students every single day. So it's been successful. As I said, we've got about 16 people in active training right now, with a whole lot more that are in that process with the ambassadors kind of working through things. So that's our best solution, is continuing down that road, and ensuring that we're getting as many folks that are interested in becoming a school bus driver, attendant, or non-CDL driver through that process as quickly and as safely as possible.
Okay, thank you for that answer. That clears up a lot of what I've been wondering. How long is the process from application, acceptance, interview, to actually getting the driver on the road, picking up our children?
Yeah, so it's heavily dependent on quite a few things. I'll say that it could be anywhere as short as about 4 weeks, but it can be as lengthy as 8 to 10 weeks. And a lot of it depends on certain things along the way, right? So there's physicals, there's background checks that may require more time. There's keeping up with the training, where some candidates don't feel comfortable moving forward, or they go to take critical tests along the way, and they may not pass. We have stopgaps in place to, again, handhold and make sure that we're providing supplemental training and not just telling people, good luck, come back with your license and we'll be here for you. We've got supplemental training in place along the way to make sure that they're feeling comfortable through that process. But it's really dependent on quite a few factors. And I will say, kind of given the climate and the low unemployment and so many opportunities out there, and as you referenced, a lot of the shortages, it's the CDL driver position isn't the easiest position to obtain right now in the job market. And again, we know that, and we look for certain types of candidates, and again, we try to do everything we can to get them through the process. But it continues to be a struggle, and right, even with us putting our best foot forward, we still see challenges every day with trying to staff CDL positions across the country.
Okay, and then I just have one other question. So you said there's 16 drivers that are in the pipeline. What is needed for us to be completely staffed with all drivers, like yellow bus drivers, non-yellow bus drivers, attendants? What are the numbers, and then where we're at with that?
Yep, I'd have to get back to you on the attendance, just because we're tracking drivers so closely. Mm-hmm. We need to hire about 30 more drivers to be fully on track, where I think we can keep up with just the regular attrition that's going on. So that's where a lot of the support that we have from the staff that's driving every day, as well as folks who we brought in, where that becomes extremely, extremely helpful in getting kids to school every day. I think the alternative is that we may not be running 30 routes today if it wasn't for those folks. So it's about double what we have in the pipeline. But again, I haven't seen applications go down since we started recruiting here in Madison, and I don't anticipate those falling off. And every day we're getting a little bit better with our training process. We're bringing in some additional resources to ensure that we've got, I guess you'd call them, some audits of our training process to make sure that we're getting people through as fast and as safe as we can, but that we're doing everything that we can to be good stewards of that process to get as many people hired as we can.
Okay, and I'll just say my comment. And okay, so my bus driver growing up in elementary school was one of my favorite people, just in elementary school, and we didn't have him in middle school. But I remember all the things, the songs he would play, the just songs that we would sing together, whatever. and I say that because I think a lot of times we think about just making sure that we have drivers here and there and that we're just covering routes. But like our custodians, like our food service folks, our drivers are also an integral part of our children's lives. And so the more that we can build the consistency to ensure that, that we're not having, folks coming in and trying to swap out and there's like a consistent basis, and that we're not having staff being pulled from their schools to do it. Like, thank God that they're doing it. But at the same time, that's not sustainable either. So I would really like to see that happen as soon as possible. That was the commitment that was told to us. And that was something that was very important to this board to ensure when we made the decision. I'm gonna keep looking out for those numbers of where we're at. And I appreciate you answering, Jason. And thank you. That's it for me, Ollie.
Yeah, and I just, if I can respond, first of all, your comment gave me chills. I remember my bus driver, and what you said is the reason why I do what I do. I think that experience is it's so important to kids. And I think our training process supports that. Our interviewing process supports that. And I do want to say, right, just I offer, myself and I mean, I could pass along my information if there's any avenues, because I think what you're talking about really comes from folks that are in the community that want to make that level of difference, right? That wake up every day and know that child that's standing on the corner, that it really means something when they open the door and they smile and they welcome aboard the bus and sing the songs, and they're there for all those special days. If there's any avenues that all of you might have unique access to engage with the community, to share that message, to come out and share kind of personal stories that I know me and my team have from our years of working in this industry, I'd be more than happy to. I think we're partnering with the district on some comments around electrification and opportunities there. And this is kind of in the same vein. If there's anything that we can be a part of where we can send that message to the community about how important it is for students to have that smiling face every day, we'd love to partner with you guys to go down that road.
If I could add just something for a second.
You have to hit the mute.
You gotta mute yourself.
I'm sorry.
So I'm sorry, you're responding to Maya Pearson's board President Pearson's last comment?
Yes.
Okay.
So just to add to, I know that we're looking at what we're promised in the proposal. And my hope is that First Student would do their best, and I believe they will, to provide those drivers. But I just wanted to make it known that it's not just a First Student issue. Madison Metro, we're seeing the same issues, and they're giving me the same thing, that they are seeing driver shortages across the board with their routes. So I think that it's just, it does not boil down to a specific provider. Everybody's seeing this nationwide shortage still. And I just want to say that I think that working internally, we're looking at a lot of different avenues internally to help out with the shortage on our end, and give MMSD employees other opportunities outside of their normal responsibilities here at the district to be able to support the district.
So I want to ask a question about the comment you just made. Are we seeing our high school students who ride Metro not get to school on time or not have buses after school as well?
From what I've gathered or the information that I've gathered from Metro leadership, they are starting to see that become an issue, and we're currently working with them to figure out a path to overcome this.
Okay, so we're seeing this at every level, high school, middle school, and elementary school, and from both of our providers.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Board Member Simkin?
Thank you. So I guess, Jason, if I can start with asking you, I wrote down all of the numbers you just shared, and I want to thank you for some of that data. I'm thinking about the 4 to 10 weeks of training that it takes to onboard a driver and where that takes us into the school year. And that we need 30 more drivers to be complete. And I assume that that's 30 more drivers without adequate substitutes. Is that correct?
Gets us to a place where we would still be challenged with substitutes, but it would provide us, we wouldn't be in the situation where we are now, where we're putting pretty much all staff members that have a commercial driver's license on the road.
How many of those 30 drivers will you be bringing in or have you brought in from other locations?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. It fluctuates, but in that number, I mean, long term, I guess the answer is that 30 would make us whole and would give us a few spares to work with on a daily basis. But I don't have the latest numbers. There was drivers that were coming in, and even as we've hired drivers over the past week, things have kind of moved around with availability of those drivers and when they've started school and how things ramped up after Labor Day. But I don't have the exact number off the top of my head right now.
Okay, I guess I'll give some context to why I'm asking. So all of us, we've been fielding calls from parents. And a call I received this afternoon on my way to this meeting was from a parent who had their child's bus canceled. And so I am asking to find out how many bus drivers do we need so that is not, so that no bus routes will be canceled.
Current routes running are 129 as of today, and that's paired routes. That's routes that are unique. And it's I believe the number is 71 yellow bus routes and 58 special education routes. And then we're also running, I don't know how the trips work out, but we're running 83 TEP trips as well every single day.
So how many bus drivers are we short right now in order to be able to run all of the routes every day?
So we're tracking 103 drivers across the CDL and non-CDL that are currently employed by us. And again, now there's fluctuations day by day. If there's a PM only driver that only works on Thursdays, and that's some of the stuff that Ken was talking about, where we're planning and we're putting out route coverage every single day to try to figure that out. But we've got one, as of just before this meeting, 103 drivers on staff.
And are you still making efforts to bring in consistently more drivers from other locations on a temporary basis?
We're attempting to, but that's tough as well. Some of the driver needs have kind of rolled back on and off. Still trying, still attempting. I think we've got longer term commitments from the ones that are here. But yeah, we're kind of playing it by ear every day as everyone's paths are kind of moving at every location, right? There's hiring going on, recruiting going on, route changes, more efficiencies. We're trying to do this pretty much all across the organization, given the challenges that we face with the CDL driver market.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for your honest answers. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I think I want to turn my next questions over to Kenneth.
All right.
So I just want to share some of the other things that I've been doing. I want to lift them up and make sure that there's space. They're primarily around communication. And so I do know that I've been hearing from some families that they're not getting any communications at all. And so I don't know if communications I heard from you that communication is one of the biggest issues right now, is figuring that out. And so there may be pockets of people that are being completely missed in that process. So I need you to know that is the case.
I-
Um,
Just to offer a thought,
yeah,
if you offline can share with us specific examples so that we could problem solve and figure out like why isn't this family getting communication? I think that would be helpful to us in problem solving some communication issues.
okay. I'm also hearing that, some buses are coming so late that there are just people in the community, like neighbors, that are coming and kind of grabbing groups of kids from bus stops and bringing them to school. And so I am also wondering about kids who rely on breakfast or food in the morning, and if there are accommodations being made for that, along with the fact that we have kids that are coming in, half an hour or more late. And so they're already starting to come in and miss learning. And so I don't know that for the learning component that we have an answer to that today, but I just want to lift that up in this space. If that is consistently the same children on the same routes day after day, that is going to be an issue.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that's a major concern, and that's like going into this, I think we were trying our best to actually put time in to the students getting into school, an extra 5 minutes to account for that, because we know that sometimes things happen, traffic accidents happen, things of that nature happen. This is exacerbated, right? We're not talking about that. However, we've done our best to try to make a space for that, going into the routing. I think that's a valid question, and I think that's something we'll look at with Cedric and our food and nutrition. Just back to the communications part, like we will do our best to make sure, and I think we've really made some strides over the last few days in our communication efforts, and we'll continue to work to get better on that.
I appreciate that. And then I'm generally worried if we have buses that are being canceled. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah,
What does that mean?
that's not, I mean, I would leave, I don't know that a bus has actually been canceled, right? So I don't know what that means either, because that's not in. We're talking about a charter service?
It was a middle school bus.
There was a fire, I think.
So couple things. I hear a couple
Yeah.
questions. Let's get you some answers. Carletra, can you talk about the breakfast piece? Because I think that's important to get answered.
Yes.
And then does canceled mean canceled? Does canceled mean double back on another route and it's late? I think we want to get some answers on that. So Carletra, do you want to start with the breakfast?
Yeah, I think really the straightforward, simple answer is that we're doing a second round of breakfast for those students who are late. So those students that are late for school, they do receive breakfast if they're hungry and if they want something to eat. So schools are making sure that they do that. Schools are also doing a really great job with staying in touch with the associate superintendents to let them know like when the buses arrive, how late the buses are, and then we're communicating that information as well to the transportation department. So we're doing a lot of in-time communication as a team so that we know when students are arriving at school.
Okay, that sounds great. And then the last note I have is, I've also been hearing about some kids that don't have an adult with them that are kind of giving up and going home. And so I just want to bring that to your attention. Some kids are just not making it to school because of the situation. So I just wanted to look at those things as issues that.
That's an attendance issue.
Board Member Mosner Feldman.
Thanks. So we had a public comment from a teacher earlier who expressed like disbelief, like no way, we didn't know about it until Thursday. And I'm curious if that's the case, if like, oh, I don't even want to know actually, but like, if that's the case, okay. Like advance notice makes a big difference, even if it's like, we think there might be a problem coming up. It just like helps people be aware of it and communicate to parents, like it just, a heads up helps. And I think that in general, people who serve the public want to rightly put forth our best foot and show to our community that we've got it together and all that kind of stuff, but where there are problems, I don't think it serves to hide that. And so I would encourage people to be open with our community as soon as we know there's a problem or might be a problem, right? Like maybe, oh, turns out no problem, it went fine, but better to know. So that's one thing. I'm curious, I got a lot of comments from community members and staff about walking routes. And like with the change in bus routes, that there are now unsafe walking routes for kids. And so I'm curious to what extent community wisdom about where it's not safe to walk is going into your thinking process. I'm curious too, if First Student offers guaranteed to bus drivers, or if it's like so many working people face problems where like, oh, I thought I was gonna have 40 hours, but now I only got 20 because they only put me on whatever. So I'm curious about if that's a practice in your organization. And I'm curious about if you've thought about raising wages to attract more drivers. Those are the questions.
Can you repeat the last question? I heard the question about guaranteed hours. I did not hear your last question.
If there's talk about raising wages to attract more drivers.
Yeah, so to answer, and Liddell, help me out with the guarantee, if you will. I know I believe there's a guarantee in place, correct?
Yeah, correct. For the standard AM PM package, it's 5 hours a day or 2.5 hours each shift. Many of the route packages are actually at that value or even more. And then for other work that people can bid on or be assigned to, there's individual guarantees. So a person who wants to really schedule their day, there's great opportunity to do that.
Thanks.
Yep, and then on the wage side, yeah, so we've thought through that to see exactly and to try to understand the impact that it would have. I will say that that the move in wages hasn't always resulted in an increase in drivers, and I'm just speaking from other markets that we've been in where we've kind of kept up with things as they've gone. Markets moving from 5-6 years ago from where it was $16-17 an hour up to $23-24 an hour here now. And we're seeing, especially post-pandemic, that recovering from the impact that the pandemic had, it's trying to basically build back from the attrition experienced over those 2 years. So it is something we're considering. I have had some internal conversations. It's on the table for discussion as we kind of consider all of the things that are moving, and considering the fact that we need to hire a fair number of drivers in a short period of time.
Thanks.
Yep.
So I guess the only question was about the safe walking routes and community members who say, hey, the bus route changed and now kids got to go under this or over this. There's like how you're taking that into account.
So I think from a standpoint, when just there was 2 parts to your question too, just about the timing of communications. I want to kind of be clear that the time that it takes to create the entire routing package for the district is a summer-long endeavor by my team. So, I mean, they do a really good job at doing that. I think what condensed us is the fact that we now had to condense routes, and our focus was to make sure we could figure out how to condense those routes and still make them work within the throughout the city limits. But that being said, typically there's a time period, a blackout period, where we create routes, and then the provider has the time to do those dry runs. We didn't exactly get that timing that we would like to. So that kind of caused some of the, where we're looking at routes where they may not be as optimal as we'd like them to. We're now in the process of going back through those routes to look at that. So that's kind of where we're at with that. As far as like the walking routes, we don't develop walking routes for students at this time. In my time here, short time here, I don't think I've ever seen any plans of that nature. I don't know if that's not a bad idea, but you know, right now, I think our number one focus is to make sure that we're getting all the kids that we currently have routed that are eligible for transportation to and from school.
I forgot to say, thank you so much for all your work. I have no doubt that every person in MMSD is just like totally bringing the public school beast within us all to this problem, and all of the drivers and dispatchers at First Student as well are absolutely, I believe 100% you're working around the clock to make this work. And I forgot to lead with that because I'm getting tired, but thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the seriousness people have brought to this conversation. I also want to thank folks for being solution focused and transparent in terms of what this problem looks like. One of the numbers I heard was that about 9% of our routes are struggling, which means the vast majority of kids are getting to school, and that is really good. But that also means that we have about 11 routes consistently that are not working out. And that if those routes are an average of 20 kids, that's 232 children who are not getting to school at home. And we're talking about people's babies. And if you've ever been standing at a bus stop at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, wondering how your kid is going to get to school or get home, you know how terrifying that is. I also want to acknowledge what this means for our teachers. At a school like Senate Middle School, if a route is a half an hour late, which happened multiple times last week, that means that teachers are staying beyond their contract time. And I want to thank our educators for standing outside in kind of the blazing heat with our children, making sure that they get home safely. We're asking a lot of our educators in terms of providing the immediate support for students and families. And I think that we have to acknowledge that. My last question around this is, if we're seeing this issue with the Metro partnership and that those numbers weren't factored into the conversation we had today in terms of their routes and their shortage, why isn't our Metro partner at the table for this conversation tonight?
They're actually, we've asked for them to be here. I know that they're still working on plans. I don't know if they have anything concrete to tell us at this point. What they have given us, we've kind of I've lifted to our team. I don't want to speak for them, but I think that they have a lot of things that are inconclusive right now as far as how they're going to deal with it, just because they're dealing with the same driver shortage. I think from what the conversations that I've had with them, they're in the same, they have the same plan of attack as what we have drivers in the pipeline. It's just a matter of getting them trained. And typically, you know, they have a similar program with their CDL drivers through the federal training.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. I want to acknowledge that this conversation represents both the needs of our young people and their families. It also represents a major investment in these partnerships from our boards and from our board and from the taxpayers. We spend millions of dollars on transportation. And so that investment has to represent a partnership that is functioning and that is functioning for all of our kids, not 90% of our kids, not 93% of our kids, all of our kids who rely on our buses. And I do believe that we can get there and that we can get there together. But I think that requires for us to have challenging conversations and confront the problems that we're facing in this moment. So I want to thank my board colleagues for the nuance they brought to this conversation, the consideration, and the real, willingness to hone in on what our young people need from us right now, and our educators and our families. And I want to thank you, First Star, for Student, for joining us this evening and being part of this conversation. Before we end the conversation, Superintendent Kufstead, you started us with really beautiful remarks centering us around our shared priorities. Is there anything you want us to know as we move forward?
Thank you, Board Member Muldrow. I appreciate the conversation and I'm really proud of our partnership as a team of implementers and our board members tonight for having this open, honest conversation about some challenges we're facing and moving forward in a productive way together. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know my team appreciates that as well. And we will continue to provide you with updates and timely updates and can just assure you that I have all of your ideas and thoughts written down, as I know the team does as well. I see Mike over there. I see all of us making note of these, and we will move forward with this and provide you with ongoing updates so that you can know what's going well and what's going not so well. And if we need to have the conversation again, we can, but I think that we have some action steps here we can move forward with, and we'll just keep the communication going. So thank you.
All right, and with that, I'll entertain a motion to.
So moved.
Thank you. Adjourn.
For a second.
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Go to sleep, Ellen.
Thank you.
And what's the?
Oh, I went off.
They're 7 hours ahead. It's 1 a.m. there.
Really?